Hey guys, welcome to this week's Thursday Night Tackle Bites. I'm Jim Carr in for Victor Lynch this week. And on this week's episode, we're going to continue with my series on crappie fishing. Now, last week I got a chance to go out with Alan Greer from the Triad Bait Company and do some crappie fishing on Lake High Rock. He showed me some really cool techniques that I'm going to pass along to you this evening to help you a little bit better understand what you need to do to fish for crappie in a cold front condition. If you don't already know that, that's what I'm going to try to show you tonight. Now, like I said, we fished behind a 2-day cold front, and we went out, fished brush piles, about 16 feet of water, and we did fairly well for the conditions we were fishing in. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, of course, but you know, Alan has a technique and he has areas on the lake, him being a guide, the Triad Bait Guide Service, Alan being a guide, he has to maintain certain areas that he can use to bring his clients to so they can go out and catch fish. So we fished some of them areas, and because of the conditions, it was a little harder than usual, but we were able to take Alan's brush pile fishing techniques and fish them in cold front conditions and end up catching some fish. Now, what I want to do is, as you can see, I have a drawing here behind me. Now, guys, I'm not an artist, so don't be emailing and texting me making fun of my drawings. I did the best I could, but I wanted to show you on the whiteboard here what I was talking about. And for some of you folks out there who've never crappie fished before, it would probably help you understand it a little bit easier. But what I want to do this evening is I want to cut away to some video clips and show you what we're doing, then come back and talk to you about them. So let's go ahead and we'll show you the first clip from last week's adventure on Lake High Rock with Alan Greer from the Triad Bait Company, and then we'll come back in here in the studio and we'll talk to you a little bit about what we're doing. So let's check out this first clip.
Few, but it seems like you to really catch the ones that don't want to really bite, you've got to get down in the brush pile.
Right.
Especially later on as it gets to the spawning season.
Crappie aren't going to chase the bait very far anyway.
No, they ain't going to come up there and chase your bait. But it seems like, I mean, you'll catch fish going across the top of them.
Ooh, I can't get in there. That trolling motor's got a mind of its own trying to keep me out of the hot spot.
You know, somebody's front-ending you, ain't they?
Somebody's front-ending me here. Every time I throw, the trolling motor decides to turn and go the other way. You got that thing on spot lock or what?
Yes.
Got it on Jim lock?
I got it on Alan.
Alan lock.
Locking everybody else out.
Yeah. Across there, guys. Oh yeah. Just wind that thing across. There's a good one. And take your time. And that's what you get right there. Once again, Triad bait, little grub right there. Pulling across the brush pile. Okay, now what we were doing, guys, is Alan would locate these brush piles and we would put a marker out, which is very important because it was windy first of all, and when you're out there in the, basically in the middle of the lake like that, it's hard to keep track of your brush pile unless you're using a depth finder and GPS. But Alan would throw out like one of these orange markers. Now, Alan paints his brown. And the reason for it is because he wants to be sneaky. He doesn't want them to see where he's fishing. So he paints his brown. So anyhow, you throw out your markers, guys, and that's gonna, Alan throws his marker right on the brush pile. I'm going to explain to you why he does that here in just a few minutes. So anyways, what we've done is we pull up to a brush pile, we put the marker out on the brush pile, and we pull back away from it a little bit, okay? And Alan has a Humminbird iPilot trolling motor, and he's apt to put it on what they call spot lock. And what that does is that will anchor the boat right in position, right where you want it to be. And it does a relatively good job as far as, you know, holding you there. If you guys don't have that technology, you can always use the markers for a reference and just use your trolling motor and just stay within a certain area and work around the brush pile. So anyways, we would get the boat positioned, and then what we would do is we would take and we would throw out beyond the brush. Now there's a lot of guys go out and they say, well, I fished brush piles today, but I didn't catch anything. Or they'll sit right on top of the brush pile. Well, Alan's technique, what he does is, first of all, he uses a rig he calls his Triad Bait structure rig, and I'm going to show you that in the next cutaway. I do a demonstration on the boat on how he rigs it. And it's the first time I fished that, and we fished all day, guys. And I'm not going to say we didn't get hung up, but we got hung up less and we were able to penetrate down into the brush. Now, I'm going to cut away and zoom in to this drawing back here behind me so I can better demonstrate to you on exactly how we were fishing the brush piles. All right, guys, now like I was saying, now, no comments on my artistic ability, all right, but you'll get the point here. What we were doing is, we roughly all day, we fished in 16 feet of water, 14, 15, 16 feet of water, okay? That's what these brush piles were. Now, when a lot of guys fish, they'll pull up on their boat, with their boat, and what they'll do is they will anchor in the brush pile. Well, the first problem that does is any of these fish in here, when that anchor comes down and hits in that brush pile, a lot of times what's going to happen, you're going to spook a lot of fish. You don't want to spook your fish, you're there to catch them. So we would spot lock or anchor the boat back out away. And usually it was within a distance, depending on, there again, your rod and reel, it was within a distance where we could cast beyond the brush pile. You don't want to cast into the brush pile. And I'm going to explain that to you in a minute. You want to cast beyond the brush pile, okay? So we would set up in a position to cast beyond the brush pile. The reason for that is because with the structure rig that Alan uses, we're able to get our jigs right down in here where these fish are hiding. Now in a cold front situation, these fish are going to be hiding, and they're going to be in this brush tight into cover. They're not going to move around much, and they're not going to chase bait very far. So you want to be able to get your jig down in that brush pile to get them out of there. Are you going to get hung up? Yes, you probably are going to. But you'll see here a little bit later on with the rig that Alan uses, you don't get hung up as much. Now, so what you do is, because you're in 16 feet of water, if you were to cast on your marker, we're going to say your marker, okay, is right here. All right, that's going to be your marker, and it's down here in the brush pile, okay? So you know where your brush pile is. You've seen it on your depth finder, and you've got it marked. Now, if you cast from here into the brush pile, what's going to happen is most guys don't, when the lure hits the water, they'll click the reel instantly. Okay, you're in 16 feet of water, guys. It's going to take 16 feet of line just to hit that spot. So what happens if you're here with your fishing rod and you cast out and you lock your reel down, this line in this lure, it's going to travel back like this, okay? You're going to completely miss the brush pile. So you can cast into there if you want to. That's fine. But when your lure hits the bait, hits the water, what you want to do is let out some line. Try to, between your reel and your first eye is usually 2 feet. So try to calculate how many times and how much line you need to let out so that that jig, when it hits the water, will travel right straight down into the brush pile, okay? So just remember that. When you first cast out there, let out a little bit of line when your jig hits the water so that you're going to go straight down and you're not going to come back at an arch with your line, all right? So once you get in the brush pile with your jig, get in there and bounce it around. When you feel these twigs, and you know, some of you guys, you know, you put these trees in and you know what they're like. They're snarly mess of tangulation, and other guys' fish lines and everything else. So once you get down there, if you use the rig we're going to show you, and you rig it up the way we show you, you can get your jig right down in here where these fish are, and it's from that point on, it's a feeling process. A branch is not going to reach out and grab your bait and tug it, okay? You'll know when you get a bite from a fish, because you're going to drop your jig in there and you want to just carefully pull it up over. When you feel a limb, just shake it just a little bit and pop it up over that limb and drop it back down in the next pocket. That's going to do two things, okay? First, it's going to keep you from getting tangled up. You don't want to snatch the hook on a branch because you're just going to get tangled. So what it's going to do is it's going to keep you from getting tangled up, but it's also going to make some noise down there and some clicking and racket, and it's going to attract these fish. Generally, most crappie, all they'll do is they'll look up. Crappie, when they feed, they look up. They don't feed like on the bottom per se or anything like that. They're looking up and they're waiting for the bait to come down, and all they'll do is they will just surge forward and open their mouth and inhale the bait and come back. What we did, if you watch us, what we do is we throw over here beyond our buoy. We let our line out and we let our jigs settle into here, because if you're fishing here, you may not, these fish right here, if it's dirty stained water, they may not see your jig. You may be only targeting a small area of that brush pile and a small number of fish. So throw your line beyond your buoy, your marker, okay, to this point. Pan out your line, let your jig settle down, and pull your jig in and work this whole tree. Now you're going to pick up this fish, and probably this fish, okay? Because you're working this whole tree is what you're going to be doing. All right, let's go ahead, and I want to show you this next clip. And what I want to show you is I want to show you the Triad structure rig and a demo on how we rig it up. And I believe you've seen it done before, but for those of you who haven't, it's really easy to do. You know, most of the time, let me use my old one here first. Most of the time, you know, when you go out fishing for crappie, you'll take your jig head and you'll come through just like this until you get right about there, and then you'll pop your hook out, and then you push your head all the way up on there. Now, don't get me wrong, guys, that's a really neat way. I did it this way for years crappie fishing, but you see that right there? That hook sticking out right there is going to get you hung up a bunch. Now what Alan does is, this is what he calls his Triad Bait structure rig. We got an 1/8 ounce jig head, and you can see there's no barb on there, and the reason for that is that the barb will tear up this flesh or this plastic, and it just make it won't work as good. You just come through with that first little spot on the head, okay? Turn your thing, turn your grub around and come all the way up to your jig head, like so. All right? And then all you do then is you just take your hook and stick it in there, so it just like you'd be bass fishing, just so the hook just barely pokes out. And I'll push the bait back out a little bit so the hook is just beneath the plastic. And then you're going to fish it just like that, and the crappie comes up, or the white perch, or the yellow perch, whatever you fish for, they come up and they grab that, and the first thing in the top of their lip is going to be that hook. And that's just barely sticking there. I can just barely feel it, and you're going to have to set the hook. You're using this technique right here. Usually, they'll hook themselves a lot, okay? If you're using this technique right there, you're going to have to get used to maybe setting the hook a little bit, but not a whole lot. And I'll guarantee you'll go out there and you'll fish that rig in brush piles like we are, and you'll catch a whole lot more fish and lose a lot less bait, and not have to tie on as much because you're not getting hung up. But that's just one of our tips right there that we wanted to show you on today's show. And if you try this out, I think you'll just love fishing crappie trying it that way. All right, guys, the Triad Bait Structure Rig. Wherever Alan come up with that name, I don't know. Email him, text him, and ask him. Alan, he has a lot of techniques. He does a lot of crappie fishing. At the Triad Bait Company, they tie up a lot of jigs. This is one I really like, and it's a squirrel tail panhead jig. Works really good. Can you fish that jig the way I showed you? Probably. Are you going to get hung up? Probably. So, you know, I hope that what we've showed you, what I've showed you today will help you out there crappie fishing. I'm sure a lot of you guys have different techniques that work equally as well. This is just one that we used out there, all right? And it works effective, especially if you're trying to find the fish that are down in the trees and they're not on shoreline because of cold fronts or whatever. You know, another thing about using a heavy line like that, a lot of guys like a thinner line, yes, if you're fishing clearer water and you're fishing shallower water. But when you're fishing in 10 feet plus water and it's a little stain, your line pretty much disappears anyways when you're down there, so the fish doesn't see it. Just keep that in mind. Anyhow, that's going to be it for this week's Tackle Bites. I hope I was able to bring something to the table to you that will help you next time you go out crappie fishing. If you have any comments, let me know. If there's a technique you'd like to see us go out, that, you know, if you've got a technique you'd like to show other guys, you'd like to see us do it, let us know. We'll go out and we'll try it out and we'll see how it works. Maybe you'll show us something that, you know, something new. You know, I started fishing with Alan here a few years back, and I've learned a lot of different things about crappie fishing from him that's helped me put a lot more fish in the boat when I go out there. So, guys, thanks for tuning in to this week's Thursday Night Tackle Bites. Next week, Victor Lynch will be back, and I think he'll probably continue with his bass fishing thing that he's doing. We'll only do the crappie fishing series here. We'll probably do it a couple more times with a couple more techniques and things for you, and then we'll switch over because we're going to start striper fishing here pretty quick. Spring striper season's coming up, so we'll be doing a lot of that. But thanks for tuning in to this week's Thursday Night Tackle Bite, guys. Appreciate your support. We appreciate all you followers on our Facebook and Instagram channels. And I'm Jim from Carolina Outdoor Magazine TV in tonight for Victor Lynch. We'll catch you next week or in a few weeks when we do it all again in the great outdoors. Thanks for watching.